Good morning, I'm Filip Huyghe and I'm going to talk to you about self-recruitment and larval dispersal in a coral reef fish. Most coral reef fish have a dual life history. They are sedentary as adults, but they have a pelagic larval phase during which dispersal over more or less longer distances is possible. Information on this larval dispersal is very important for coral reef conservation and more specifically for marine and protected area design. Because we want marine protected areas to fulfill multiple roles. We want them to provide spillover from protected zones to adjacent reefs and export fish to these zones. We also want them to take into account genetic differentiation when spacing marine protected areas, and we want to create networks of resilient networks of protected zones. Resilience is met through the exchange of individuals between these several zones. It's also important to have a balance between protected zones and zones that are reefs that are left open for exploitation by local fishers. I studied self-recruitment and larval dispersal in the Skunk Clownfish on a series of reefs around the island of Unguja in front of the coast of Tanzania in East Africa. I applied parentage analysis using macrosatellite loci, which means that I compared genetic data of adult fish with that of juveniles, and only adult fish that share at least one allele per locus examined with the juvenile can be a potential parent of that juvenile. In this example I give you here, you can see that only for the first locus, only 3 of the adults can be a potential parent of the juvenile. If we add a second and a third locus, you can see that only 1 of the adults is left as a potential parent. Adding a lot more loci and studying more individuals, I was able to conduct my study. I found that overall there was 21% self-recruitment in the system I studied, which means that 21% of the larvae returned to their home reef. However, there was a remarked difference between a marine protected area, which was a reef that was in very good health, and other reefs that were exploited and that were less healthy. You see, there was 35% self-recruitment in the marine protected zone, and the other reefs had only levels of between 20 and 10% of self-recruitment. In the graph you see on the right, presents dispersal distances of larvae. So on the x-axis is the distances per larvae, and the y-axis shows the number of larvae that dispersed a certain distance. Most larvae dispersed only very short distances. Mean dispersal distance was only 15 kilometers. So I can conclude from this that self-recruitment is common in the reef system I studied, and it may be influenced by reef health. Short distance dispersal is very important from a demographic point of view. Long distance dispersal does happen, but it is rather exceptional. I finish by thanking my sponsors and thank you for your attention.